The storm hit Silver Hollow like it had a personal grudge against the town. Snow wasn't just falling. No, it was slamming sideways, scraping the windows, piling on rooftops like the whole sky was trying to bury everything underneath. And it was cold. That kind of cold that feels mean. The kind that bites straight through your coat and keeps going. And right in the middle of that mess, Deputy Chief Mark Callahan pulled his cruiser into the parking lot of Pine Ridge Rescue. The tires skidded on the ice. He muttered under his breath, something like, "Easy, easy," even though he wasn't talking to the car. He was talking to himself, or maybe to the little girl sitting quietly in the back seat. Emma Callahan, 10 years old, tiny thing, hair tucked into a wool hat, misty gray eyes staring at nothing and everything at the same time. She couldn't see the storm, but she could hear it, the wind howling around them like some giant animal pacing the parking lot. "Okay, sweetheart," Mark said, opening her door. "We're here." Emma reached out her hand, searching for him. She never grabbed fast, always slow, gentle, careful, like the world might break if she touched it too hard. Mark took her hand, squeezed it once. His breath fogged in the air as he leaned down. "You good?" he asked softly. She nodded, even though the tiny tremble in her fingers kinda said otherwise. They stepped out into the storm. Snow stung their faces. The wind pushed at them like it wanted them to turn back. And honestly, Mark almost did. Because what father takes his blind daughter out in the middle of a blizzard to pick a dog? A desperate one. A broken one. The kind who'd been failing at everything else life had thrown at him. He held her hand tighter, guiding her up the walkway toward the glowing sign. Pine Ridge Rescue. Helping paws. Healing hearts. "Yeah," Mark muttered under his breath. "We'll see about that." Inside, warm air hit them, thick with the smell of wet fur, disinfectant, and that earthy scent all animal shelters somehow share. Then came the sound. Barking, whining, paws tapping on concrete. Emma flinched, gripping her dad's jacket, pitch first. Hey," he murmured. "It's okay. I'm right here." A woman in a puffy red vest hurried over. Shelter Director Margaret O'Donnell. Maggie. 50s. Soft lines around her eyes. The kind you only get from smiling a lot or worrying a lot. With shelter workers, it's usually both. "Morning, Deputy," she said, brushing snow off her sleeves. "Rough weather." "Yeah," Mark said. "Figured we'd stop by anyway." For Emma. Maggie smiled toward the girl. "Hi there, sweetheart. We've got lots of friends who'd love to meet you." Emma offered a small smile. "Are they all barking?" Maggie laughed. "Most of them, yeah. They get excited. But don't worry. You'll get used to it." They walked down a long, echoing hallway lined with kennels. Dogs of every size and color pressed against the bars. Tails thumping, paws sliding, voices bouncing off the walls. Emma reached out sometimes, brushing her fingertips against the metal doors, listening to each bark like she was reading something in it. Mark watched her. Every small thing she did felt huge, because for months she'd done so little, just sat in her room, clutching the last stuffed animal her mom had bought her, refusing to talk, refusing to play. Losing her sight, losing her mom. It had frozen her from the inside out. Truth is, this whole guide dog idea, it wasn't really about mobility. It was about hope, about trying something, anything, to bring light back into his little girl's world. Then, halfway down the row, Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, why is it quiet over there?" Mark looked. The barking had faded. The whining, too. Just silence. Maggie followed his gaze. Her smile slipped. "Oh," she said softly. "That one." A chill crawled up Mark's spine, and it wasn't from the snow. Emma tilted her head. "Is the cage empty?" "No, sweetheart," Maggie whispered. That's kennel 12. The lights flickered overhead, buzzing, making the whole place feel a little haunted. Inside the cage, tucked into the far corner, lay a dog. A big dog, still as stone, thick sable fur, a scar along his muzzle, ears twitching just enough to prove he was alive. Ranger. "He came from the Denver K9 unit," Maggie murmured. "Lost his handler in a raid since. Then, he doesn't bark, doesn't play, barely eats, won't look at anyone. It's like he checked out, you know? Like his soul left, and his body forgot to follow." Mark swallowed hard. A broken cop. A blind girl. A dead-eyed K9. Yeah. Life had a twisted sense of humor. Emma stood very still, listening to the silence. "Dad?" she whispered. "Can we go closer?" And just like that, the night, the storm, the years of grief, all of it pressed in around them, as three shattered lives unknowingly stepped toward the same door, toward the same destiny, toward Cage 12. And the strange thing was, even though they were standing in a hallway full of barking dogs, somehow everything got quieter the second they turned toward Cage 12, like the noise just fell away. Almost like the world was saying, "Okay, pay attention now." Maggie slowed down before they reached the end of the row, and something shifted in her face. Not fear, but that heavy look people get when they're about to show you a wound that never truly healed. Emma stayed close to her dad, one hand on his jacket, the other brushing the air in front of her like she was feeling for something unseen. Then she whispered, "Dad, the air's different here." Mark blinked. "Different how?" "I'm not sure," she murmured. "It just feels sad." Maggie exhaled through her nose, the kind of breath you let out when someone says something painfully true. "Well," she said quietly, "you're not wrong, sweetheart." They reached the cage, and yeah, Everything around them still barked and rattled and begged for attention. But cage 12, it felt like a vacuum, a dead zone. Not silent like peace, silent like a grave. Ranger lay curled in the back corner of the cage, his head resting on his paws, eyes half open but empty. Not sleepy, not calm. Empty. The kind of empty that comes after losing the only person you ever trusted. He didn't lift his head, didn't twitch his tail, didn't follow their movement. It was like they weren't even there. Jesus, Mark whispered, then caught himself. Sorry. Just didn't expect him to be that still. Yeah, Maggie said softly. He's been like that since the day he came in. Won't touch his food unless we leave it in the dark. Won't make a sound. Won't come to the front. Just lies there. She hesitated, leaning closer to Mark, lowering her voice. Some of the volunteers say he died in that raid alongside his handler. Just not physically. Emma turned her face toward them, frowning. What do you mean died? Mark shifted uncomfortably. Sweetheart, it's just an expression. They mean he's hurting. No, Maggie said gently. She's right to ask. She crouched beside Emma so their voices matched height. Ranger lost his partner, and when a K9 loses their partner like that, sometimes what's left inside them just shuts down. Emma swallowed, letting those words settle. Like when Mom... Mark's hand tightened around hers. Hey, Em. You don't have to... No, Dad, she said softly. It's okay. I get it. And somehow, you knew she did. She took a small step toward the bars, one hand out in front like she was approaching a sleeping dragon. From behind them, Maggie said quietly, Careful, honey. He's not dangerous, but he's unpredictable. He doesn't want visitors. Mark gently tugged her arm. Emma, maybe we should... I just want to listen, she whispered. And she did. She stood there in stillness, letting the air settle around her. Her breathing slowed. Her chin lifted just slightly, as if she were sensing something Frotpamavso couldn't. Finally, she whispered, He's not angry. Mark blinked. How do you know that? I don't hear any tension, she said. It's weird. The other dogs, their breathing feels sharp, fast, excited. But him, he sounds tired. Maggie stared at her, stunned. That's exactly what he is, she murmured. Tired in a way rest doesn't fix. Emma stepped closer, her fingers brushing the cold steel bars. And for the first time, Ranger's ears flicked. A tiny movement. Barely anything. But in a dog that hadn't moved for days, it hit like a thunderclap. Oh my God, Maggie whispered. Mark froze. Did he just... Yeah, Maggie breathed. Yeah, he did. Emma sensed the shift, even without seeing it. "There it is," she murmured. "Something's there. He's listening." Inside the cage, Ranger didn't lift his head, didn't stand, but his breathing changed. A slow inhale, a heavier exhale. His eyes blinked once, slow, weighted, like something deep inside him stirred. "He's hurt," Emma whispered. Mark sighed. "Sweetheart, we know he's hurt. Maggie said he—" "No," she said softly. "Not the body hurt. The inside hurt. The lonely hurt." Those words hit Mark like a punch to the chest. He looked at his little girl, snow still tangled in her hair, her small hand resting on the bars of a cage holding a dog who'd lost everything, and something twisted inside him. That awful mix of guilt and hope. Emma leaned forward, voice trembling. "I know what that feels like." And holy hell, the world stopped. Even the barking down the hall dropped for half a breath. Ranger's eyes shifted. Not much, but enough to catch the faintest glint of amber turning toward her. Maggie's hand flew to her mouth. "That's the first time he's reacted to someone since he came here." Emma reached out again, her voice barely more than a breath. "You can stay there. You don't have to come closer. Just, if you can hear me, it's okay. You're not alone." Ranger didn't move, but the silence changed, from hollow to listening, from dead to maybe painfully alive. Emma turned toward her dad, worry and something small, bright, flickering across her face. "Dad," she whispered, "I don't think he's done yet." And behind those steel bars, the dog who had once run into gunfire without fear blinked twice, like a soul deciding whether to return, like a warrior hearing his name from very, very far away. A stillness filled the room, heavy, fragile, electric. 3 broken lives, 1 silent cage, and something, someone, somewhere, starting to breathe again. Maybe it was because of that tiny blink, or maybe just the way the air shifted in that hallway. But something in Emma changed. Like she suddenly knew this wasn't the moment to back away. This was the moment to step in. "Emma," Mark said softly, "I think that's close enough, sweetheart." But she shook her head, tiny and sure. "No, Dad. He heard me. I don't know, I can feel it." Maggie lifted a cautious hand. "Just don't touch the bars, okay? He's not aggressive, but—" Emma reached out anyway. Not fast, not dramatic, just a slow, trembling motion. The motion of a kid who's been living in the dark long enough to recognize another living thing hiding in its own darkness. Her fingertips brushed the cold steel, and right away, Mark stepped forward like he was about to yank her back. "Emma!" But he froze mid-step, because Ranger didn't move, didn't growl, didn't flinch, didn't do anything except breathe. and somehow that breathing was louder than all the barking behind them, like it was echoing in the empty parts of all three of them. Emma whispered, barely a breath, "Hi, Ranger." Her voice cracked softly, not in fear, but in that quiet, fragile way of someone speaking straight from the heart. "Daddy, he's not mad," she murmured. "He's—" But before she could finish, something happened. Something tiny, something soft, something you'd miss if you blinked too fast. A sound, barely there, the sound of nails shifting gently against concrete. Mark snapped his eyes toward the cage. Wait, did he just? Maggie covered her mouth. Oh my God. Inside the cage, Ranger pushed one paw forward. Just one. Like testing the world to see if it would break him again. Emma froze, hand still on the bars. She didn't breathe, didn't move, didn't dare. Ranger's body trembled, like every muscle was arguing with itself, like he wasn't sure if stepping forward was allowed, or safe, or worth the pain. But then, he stood, shaky, stiff, but standing. Mark whispered, "Holy," then caught himself. I mean, seriously? Ranger took another step, his head lifted, not high, not proud like the hero he used to be, but enough for the dying light in his eyes to flicker. A spark. Faint, but real. Emma swallowed, her hand trembling slightly. "It's okay," she breathed. "It's just me." Ranger's ears twitched at her voice, and then, impossibly, achingly, he crossed the last few feet to the bars until his nose touched the steel. Emma felt the warmth of his breath and gasped softly. "Dad?" "Yeah," Mark whispered, voice cracking. I see him." Emma lifted her hand the tiniest bit. "Can I?" she asked. And nobody answered. Not because they didn't want to, but because their voices simply stopped working. So Emma made the choice herself. Her hand slipped through the gap in the bars, slow, gentle, shaking like a leaf in winter. And Ranger, he leaned in, pressed his cold, damp nose into her palm like it was the first warm thing he'd felt in months. Emma inhaled sharply, not scared, but overwhelmed. The way someone reacts when the world suddenly hands them a miracle without asking if they're ready. Mark's knees almost buckled. Maggie let out a sound. Not quite a sob, but close. Ranger closed his eyes, just for a second. But that second said everything. Pain, loss, fear, and buried beneath it all, a tiny, stubborn ember of hope that refused to die. Emma brushed her thumb along his fur. "Daddy," she whispered. "He's scared. Just like me." Mark crouched beside her, swallowing hard. "Yeah," he breathed. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think you're right. Ranger opened his eyes again, and there it was. Not a miracle, not a full spark, but the beginning of something that hadn't existed in either of them for a very, very long time. Trust. Just the tiniest flicker of it. Emma leaned her forehead gently against the bars. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. "I promise." Ranger let out a shaky exhale, his breath warming her fingers. And for the first time since the raid that shattered his world, his tail moved. Not a wag, barely a twitch, but enough to break something open inside every person in that hallway. Because that wasn't instinct. That was a soul, deciding to come back. The moment didn't feel big. It felt sacred. Like two broken hearts had just found the only other heart that understood their pain. Emma smiled through tears she didn't even realize had fallen. "Daddy, I think he picked us." And in that dim rescue hallway, with snow tapping softly on the roof, and 3 lives holding their breath, Ranger pushed his head deeper into her hand, choosing her, choosing life again, choosing hope. If that moment at the rescue center was the spark, then the drive home felt like the crackling wick of a fire no one fully understood yet. Something new was beginning. Yeah, but something broken was coming with them too. Mark drove slow along the snow-packed roads of Silver Hollow, glancing into the rearview mirror every few seconds. Ranger sat in the back seat beside Emma, body stiff, eyes wide, like he was waiting for something bad to jump out of the dark. "Hey, big guy," Mark murmured at a stop sign. "You're safe, okay? You're going home. Well, our home. With us." Ranger didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't even twitch his ears. He was there, but not there. Emma kept one small hand resting lightly on his shoulder, like she was afraid he might drift too far away. "It's okay, Ranger," she whispered. "If you need the quiet, I can be quiet too." Mark swallowed hard at that. This kid, she understood things no kid should ever understand. When they pulled into the driveway, a small, pale blue house with a crooked mailbox and a porch swing that squeaked when the wind hit it, Ranger stepped out of the car like a soldier walking into unknown territory. Not curious, not hopeful, just bracing for impact. Inside, warmth hit him first, then scent, cinnamon from a candle, laundry soap on blankets, the faint trace of Emma's shampoo. But comfort didn't settle into him. If anything, it made him tense. He paced the living room in small, tight circles, sniffing corners, checking shadows, scanning windows like each one was a sniper's perch. Emma sat cross-legged on the rug, her cane on the floor beside her like a folded wing. "You're safe," she said softly. "There's no loud here, no bad here." But the night had other plans. It started with a thump, not loud, not threatening, just a broom falling in the laundry room. But Ranger reacted like a gun had gone off. He lunged so fast his nails screeched on the hardwood. He slammed into the wall shoulder first, claws tearing at the baseboards like he was trying to dig into safety. "Whoa! Whoa! Ranger!" Mark shouted, rushing toward him. But Ranger didn't hear him, couldn't hear him. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere with smoke, shouting, and gunfire. His chest heaved. His eyes were wild, unfocused, searching for an enemy that wasn't there. Emma stood in the doorway, small and shaking. "Dad, is he hurt?" "No," Mark whispered, though he wasn't entirely sure. "He's scared." Then came the second nightmare, his own reflection. The glass door leading to the backyard caught Ranger's eye, and suddenly that reflection, that ghost version of himself, became the enemy. He growled, deep, low, a sound crawling up from a place older than memory. Mark stepped forward. "Hey! Hey! It's you! It's just you!" But Ranger didn't believe him, didn't trust him, didn't trust his own eyes. Emma stepped closer. "Ranger, it's okay." The dog froze, caught between growl and breath, instinct pulling him one way, something softer pulling him another. Then came the third nightmare, a silent bark, one of those barks that doesn't come out, like his throat locked on a memory he couldn't shake. He snapped at empty air, turning his head like he was tracking someone running. "Dad," Emma whispered, voice cracking. "Is he fighting something?" Mark knelt beside her, hand rubbing her back. "Yeah," he said softly. "Just not something we can see." They watched Ranger spin once, twice, then collapse into the corner by the heater, trembling so hard his collar jingled. His breaths were shallow, rapid, panicked. Emma crawled toward him before Mark could stop her. Wait." But she didn't hesitate. She reached him and slowly, so gently you'd think she was touching a bird with broken wings, rested her hand on his head. "It's okay," she whispered. "If you're scared." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'll stay scared with you." Ranger's shaking slowed. His breathing eased. He didn't look up, didn't move. But some part of him, the part locked behind that cage, behind grief, behind every nightmare, knew exactly what she meant. Because she wasn't just touching him. She was choosing him. Not as a tool, not as a pet. Just as someone who hurt the same way she did. Mark stood in the doorway, chest tight, head pounding from the weight of it all. Two broken souls. One kid who couldn't see. One dog who couldn't forget. And somehow they were holding each other together better than he ever could. And maybe it was because the house had finally gone quiet after that long, messy first night. Or maybe because Emma had fallen asleep beside Ranger until dawn. But the next afternoon felt different somehow. Not calmer, just softer. Like the storm had stopped punching and started whispering instead. Mark watched from the kitchen doorway as Emma shuffled through the living room, her hand brushing the wall, her cane tapping lightly. Ranger followed her like a shadow, steps careful, head low, as if he still didn't trust the light yet. Sweetheart," Mark said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You sure you're feeling okay? You were up half the night." She smiled faintly. "It wasn't scary when he was breathing next to me." Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. "What do you even say to that?" Ranger nudged Emma's hand with his nose, like confirming her words. His tail gave one tiny thump, not a wag, more like a heartbeat. Emma giggled. "See? He agrees." Mark sighed, half defeated, half grateful. Yeah, I can see that." But then Emma stopped walking. Right in front of the one place in the house neither of them ever touched. The piano. Old, dark oak, a little dusty. Her mother's piano. Mark's throat tightened instantly. "Hey," he said quickly, stepping forward. "Maybe not that, Em. It's been a long day, and—" "It's okay, Dad," she whispered. "I'm not scared." "Yeah, but—" He swallowed, voice shaking. "Honey, you haven't gone near that thing since—" She reached out and placed her fingertips on the edge of the piano bench. "I remember the song," she whispered. "The one Mom used to hum while she cooked. The one she said sounded like sunshine." Mark looked away fast, jaw clenched. He wasn't ready for this. He would never be ready for this. "Sweetheart, we don't need to do this today." But Emma slid onto the bench. Ranger froze beside it, ears lifting slightly, like he recognized something in the air. Emma placed her hands on the keys, not pressing, just feeling. "I know it won't be perfect," she murmured, "but maybe perfect isn't the point." Mark blinked hard. His vision blurred. He turned away and gripped the back of the couch, forcing a deep breath. The room felt too small, too full of ghosts. Behind him, the first note played, soft, shaky, a little flat. But it hit him like a punch straight to the chest. He closed his eyes, teeth clenched. "God, Em." She didn't stop. Her fingers moved carefully, searching, listening, learning the distance between notes by memory alone. Some sounded wrong, some wobbled, some died halfway. But every single one was honest. Halfway through the second measure, he heard something else. A shift. A body settling on the rug. He looked over his shoulder. Ranger had laid down beside her. Not tense. Not curled like usual. Not bracing for an invisible blow. He was relaxed. Not fully, but more than Mark had ever seen. His head rested on his paws. His eyes fluttered shut. His breathing slowed. Not panicked. Not shallow. Steady. Almost peaceful. Mark felt something break inside him. Not the bad kind. The good kind. The kind that makes room for something new. Emma kept playing. "I don't know all the parts," she murmured. and I forget the middle sometimes. But when I play it, it feels like Mom's here, like she's humming with me." Ranger exhaled, long, low, like releasing something he'd been carrying for far too long. Emma paused, fingers hovering in midair. "Dad?" she whispered. "Is he okay?" Mark nodded, voice soft and broken. "Yeah, yeah, baby. He's more than okay." Emma kept playing. This time the notes were steadier, still imperfect, still human, but glowing with something warm. Ranger shifted closer until his body touched the piano bench. He wasn't guarding, wasn't hiding. He was choosing to be there, choosing the music, choosing the living room, choosing the little girl who couldn't see and yet somehow saw right through him. Emma felt him lean in and smiled. "You like it?" she whispered. Ranger lifted his head and pressed his muzzle to her knee. Time 300 PEMs. No bark, no whine, just trust. Mark wiped his face with the heel of his hand, finally breathing again. Really breathing, for the first time in years. This right here, was the first moment Ranger wasn't a soldier, or a survivor, or a ghost of a K-9 who'd lost everything. He was just a dog listening to a little girl playing her mother's song. Emma finished the final shaky chord and let it linger in the air. Then she whispered, "Daddy, I think the music helped him find his way back." Mark nodded, tears finally spilling. "I think it helped all of us, Em." Ranger lifted one paw and rested it gently on Emma's foot, the softest, quietest gesture of loyalty Mark had ever seen. Like the dog had made a decision, "I'm staying, and maybe, just maybe, I want to live again." That afternoon with the piano, after watching Ranger melt into that old song like it stitched something back together inside him, the whole house shifted, not magically, not overnight, just little changes. Tiny signs that the ghost dog from cage 12 wasn't a ghost anymore. And Mark saw it first on a Thursday afternoon. The snow in Silver Hollow had started falling again. Not the violent kind, just that lazy, drifting kind that makes everything smell like cold and pine. Emma wanted fresh air, so Mark bundled her up in her puffy red coat and fuzzy ear warmers, and they stepped into the yard. Ranger followed, his steps light in the snow, ears swiveling constantly like he was mapping every sound. "Stay close, buddy," Mark muttered, "just in case she—" And then it happened. Emma's cane tapped an uneven patch of ground hidden under a thin layer of snow, and her boot slipped. It wasn't a big fall, not dramatic, just enough to send her pitching forward with a startled gasp. Mark moved, but he didn't reach her first. Ranger did. He leaped forward so fast, snow blasted up behind him. He slid underneath Emma's side right as she stumbled, taking her weight across his shoulder like he'd trained for this exact moment. Emma steadied herself, grabbing fistfuls of his fur. "Oh, oh my gosh, Ranger," she gasped, laughing. "You caught me!" Ranger nudged her hand as if saying, "Of course I did. That's my job." Mark stood frozen, one hand gripping the porch rail, heart hammering in his ribs. He whispered to no one, "Well, damn." And that was just the start. 2 days later, the wind kicked up out of nowhere. Silver Hollow always flipped from calm to blizzard mode in minutes. Mark was shoveling the walkway while Emma stood near the steps, hands stretched out to hear the air the way she always described it. Ranger was beside her, always beside her, scanning the yard, nose twitching. Suddenly a gust barreled down the hill, strong enough to shove Emma back a step. She yelped, unprepared. Before Mark could shout, Ranger pressed his entire body against her legs, shielding her from the wind like a wall of fur and muscle. Emma grabbed onto his coat. "Oh, wow. Ranger, you okay?" Ranger didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't let the wind push her an inch. He braced himself like he'd done this 1,000 times, not guarding a handler, not chasing a suspect, but guarding her. Mark felt something tighten in his throat. His shovel slipped from his hands. "Boy," he whispered, "you're really doing this, aren't you?" Ranger looked at him, just long enough to say, "She's mine to protect." But the moment that undid Mark completely came later that week. It was almost midnight. The house was dark, quiet, except for the heater clicking every minute. Mark was half asleep on the couch, paperwork scattered across his lap when a soft, broken sound floated down the hallway. Emma. Crying. Mark jolted upright. He wasn't fully awake, but he was already running. He reached her door first, but Ranger slipped inside before him. In the faint hallway light, Mark saw it. Emma curled on the edge of her bed, knees pulled to her chest, fingers twisted in her blanket. Not screaming, not calling for him, just crying in that quiet, painful way kids who've lost too much cry. Ranger hopped onto the bed, gently, like he knew the rules but decided breaking them was worth it. He nudged her arm, then climbed closer until his chest pressed against her ribs. Then he did something Mark had never seen him do. He rested his head right over her heart. Emma let out a shuddering breath, like that single gesture unclenched something inside her. "Ranger," she whispered, "it hurts sometimes. I miss her so much." Ranger didn't move, didn't bark, didn't whine. He just stayed there, warm, steady, listening like her heartbeat was the only sound he cared about. Emma wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. Ranger's tail thumped once, soft, slow, enough to say, "I'm here. I'm here. I'm here." Mark stood in the doorway, hand clamped over his mouth. He'd seen Ranger take down armed suspects. He'd watched him run into gunfire. He'd read reports calling him fearless, relentless, a legend. But nothing came close to this. This wasn't bravery. This was devotion. Not the trained kind. The chosen kind. Emma whispered into Ranger's fur, "You don't have to be scared alone. And I don't either." Ranger pressed closer, eyes half closed. And in that moment, The dog, too broken to save, became the thing holding his child's whole world together. Mark's chest ached. The kind of ache right before gratitude takes your legs out. He whispered into the dark hall, "Thank you, you damn miracle dog." Because Ranger wasn't just guiding Emma anymore. He was becoming her eyes, her shield, her courage, her light in the dark she couldn't see. And Mark knew, in a way that chilled him and comforted him at the same time, if anything in this world ever tried to take Emma again, Ranger would meet it first. Maybe a week, maybe 2. Things almost felt normal for the Callahans. Not perfect, but that kind of shaky peace you don't trust yet, but you're grateful for anyway. Ranger was easing into the house. Emma was laughing more. Mark was breathing again. But peace never lasts long in places like Silver Hollow. Sometimes you don't hear danger coming. Sometimes you do, and sometimes, the worst kind, you feel it before it actually shows up. It started with a call. Mark was halfway into his jacket, getting ready for the night shift, when the dispatch radio on his counter crackled. He froze, one sleeve stuck halfway up his arm. "Callahan, you copy?" He sighed. "Yeah, go ahead." Static. Then a voice he knew well. Deputy Briggs. A man whose tone only sounded that tight when something was very, very wrong. "Need you to confirm something. Caleb Rourke failed his check-in. Probation office flagged it an hour ago." Mark stiffened. "Repeat that?" "He's off-grid, Mark, and internal notes say he spoke your name twice during last week's evaluation. Threat tones." Mark's jaw clenched so hard it clicked. "Any idea where he is now?" "Not yet. But listen." Briggs breathed into the radio, a tight, heavy sound. "The file suggests strong motive for retaliation. His record says, high chance of targeting family of arresting officer. That's you." Mark went cold all over. "Briggs, my daughter's home." "I know. That's why I'm telling you first." Mark grabbed his keys, his badge, his holster, hands shaking without permission. "Put a patrol past my street every 30 minutes. "You got it. And Mark, be careful. Rourke's been watching people. Cameras caught him near the old trails. Damn it. Stay sharp out there." The radio clicked off. And just like that, the calm inside the Callahan home crushed in on itself. Thing is, Mark didn't know it yet, but Rourke had already been there, watching, waiting. The man wasn't just dangerous. He was patient, tall, wiry frame, carved out of hard angles and bad choices, a face burned by years of hate and cold winters, and a memory like a knife. He followed Mark's routines, learned which nights he worked late, which windows stayed unlocked in the cold, which path Emma used in the yard. Neighbors later said they thought they'd seen a shadow, a shape, a man in a hood near the tree line, but no one reported it. Because in snowy towns like Silver Hollow, shadows come with the season. Rourke counted on that. He waited until all the right pieces aligned. A blizzard warning power flickering across half the town roads, icing over Mark, assigned to an overnight call-out at the far quarry. A perfect night for monsters. Snow came down sideways, so thick you couldn't tell sky from ground. Mark kissed Emma's head before leaving. "Stay inside. Lock everything. I'll be back before midnight." Emma smiled. "Ranger will stay with me." Ranger stood tall beside her, tail low but steady, like he understood the assignment. Mark hesitated at the door. Something gnawed at him. That prickling instinct cops get when the storm isn't the only thing coming. "Ranger," he whispered, crouching down. "You take care of her. You hear me?" Ranger pressed his forehead into Mark's hand. And in that tiny gesture, Mark felt both fear and reassurance punch through him. Then he left. The wind swallowed the sound of the cruiser almost instantly. Inside, the house flickered, lights dimming, then brightening, then dimming again. Emma sat on the couch with her blanket while Ranger paced slowly, scanning every creak, every shift of the wind. Animals sometimes know danger before humans do. And then, there it was. A sound so soft Emma barely noticed, but Ranger did. A crunch. Snow being stepped on. Slow, deliberate steps. Not the shuffle of wind. Not an animal. Human. Coming closer. Ranger froze. Muscles locked. Head snapping toward the back of the house. Emma sat up. "Ranger, what is it?" He growled. Not loud, not showy, but deep. Primal. A sound a dog only makes when something wicked is on the other side of a wall. Emma felt the vibration in the floorboards. Her breathing hitched. "Ranger, talk to me. What's happening?" He didn't turn toward her. He only stared at the kitchen. The back door rattled. Once. Then again. Emma stiffened. "Dad?" No answer. Ranger stepped in front of her. Shoulders squared, body rigid, tail straight out like steel. Then, the faint click of metal. Someone testing the lock. Snow swirled under the door frame. And then, a voice. A low, ragged whisper right outside the glass. "Callahan." Emma's heart stopped. Ranger bared his teeth, and the silhouette of a man slid into view through the blizzard. A shape so dark it swallowed the storm behind him. The monster from Cage 12 wasn't the one they had to fear anymore. The real monster was standing at their back door. The second that shadow filled the glass of the back door, Ranger already knew what Emma couldn't see. This wasn't just danger. This wasn't noise, or weather, or some random drunk. This was him. The reason Mark's voice shook earlier. The reason Ranger's hackles had been up all week. The thing he'd sensed in the woods. Caleb Rourke. The man who brought nightmares to life. The door rattled again, harder and Ranger lunged forward, paws planted on the tile, teeth bared. Emma clutched the blanket. "Ranger, is someone out there?" Another rattle. A hinge squealed. And then, boom! The entire back door blew inward like it had been kicked by a battering ram. Cold air and snow tore into the kitchen. A shape stumbled inside, tall, soaked, breath steaming, a knife glinting in his fist. Emma screamed. Ranger didn't. He launched. Not bark, not hesitation, just pure instinct. Protect the girl. The impact shook the kitchen. Ranger slammed into Rourke's arm, teeth cutting through sleeve and skin. The knife clattered across the floor, skidding under the table. Rourke roared, stumbling back. "You again! Sit down, mutt!" He grabbed a broken chair leg and swung. Ranger ducked, barely, but the wood cracked against his shoulder with a sickening thud. Emma pressed her hands to her ears. "Ranger! Ranger! Where are you?" Ranger barked, for the first time since the raid that destroyed him. A deep, explosive sound that rattled the cabinets. Rourke lunged again. They collided. The kitchen table flipped, plates shattered across the floor. Ranger clawed at Rourke's jacket, dragging him toward the stairs, away from Emma. But Rourke drove a knee into Ranger's ribs, knocking the air from him. "Stupid animal!" The lights flickered. Once, twice, then died. Total darkness. Emma staggered back. "Please, please don't hurt him." Heavy footsteps. Rourke's, going up the stairs, straight, toward her. She heard every step, every groan of the wood beneath his boots. "Dad, Daddy, where are you?" Rourke's shadow rose in front of her. She froze. Then, a snarl cut through the dark. Ranger barreled up the stairs like a weapon, bone and fury and heart. He slammed into Rourke's back, launching him into the hallway wall. They rolled, crashed, hit the banister. "Get off!" Rourke roared. The knife, kicked loose in the chaos, clinked across the wood, falling over the railing. But Rourke didn't need it. He grabbed Ranger by the scruff and punched, once, twice, hard enough to shake the floor. Ranger yelped. Emma cried out, "Ranger!" That was all it took. Ranger exploded upward again, jaws snapping inches from Rourke's throat. Blood splattered across the floorboards. "You damn demon!" Rourke yelled. He reached blindly, grabbed a broken banister leg, jagged, sharp, and drove it downward, straight into Ranger's side. Emma heard the sound, a wet, awful thwack, followed by Ranger's strangled cry. "No!" she screamed, reaching blindly toward the violence she couldn't see. But Ranger didn't fall, didn't retreat. He staggered, blood dripping onto the steps, but he stood, shaking, barely breathing, but standing, between Emma and death. Rourke snarled, "You just don't quit, do you?" He lunged. Ranger braced. It happened fast, too fast for Emma to understand. Rourke rushed forward, knife recovered, blade flashing in the dark. Ranger leapt. They collided by the banister. A body slammed the railing. Wood cracked. Glass shattered somewhere in the house. Emma reached the top step, screaming, "Ranger, please come back!" Then, a grunt, a crash, a long, heavy thud at the bottom of the stairs. Silence. For one terrible second, Emma thought Ranger had fallen. "Ranger?" Her voice cracked like breaking ice. Time 1800 mums. But something warm pressed against her leg. Ranger, barely standing, blood slick across his fur, breathing ragged, trembling. He nudged her knee. A soft, shaking, "I'm here." Emma dropped to her knees. "Oh God! Ranger, no, no, no!" Ranger's legs buckled. He fell sideways onto the landing, chest heaving, breath whistling in and out. "Stay with me," she sobbed. "Please stay. Please, please." Ranger blinked slowly, as if the darkness wasn't swallowing him. But he was choosing to stay awake just to hear her voice. Emma bent over him, crying into his fur. Downstairs, Rourke lay broken at the bottom of the staircase. But up here was where the real battle lived. A dying dog, a blind girl, two hearts refusing to let each other go. While Ranger was bleeding out beside Emma, something else was happening miles away that would change everything in the next 7 minutes. Mark was still at the far quarry when the storm swallowed the radio signal. 1 second he was talking with Deputy Briggs. The next, nothing but static. "Briggs, come again?" More static. "Briggs, hello?" Nothing. Then a screech. Not over the radio, outside. Brakes. Skidding tires. A car swerving in the snow. Mark sprinted toward the sound, boots sliding, flashlight cutting through the storm like a shaky sword. A black truck sat sideways across the road. Driver's door open. Footprints leading into the wind. And at the end of those footprints, Caleb Rourke, walking straight toward the forest. Mark's stomach dropped. He didn't think. He just moved. "Rourke, stop!" The man turned, eyes wild beneath his hood, snow crusting his beard. "Oh, hey, deputy," he rasped. "Was just heading somewhere important." Mark's blood froze. "Where?" Rourke's grin cracked across his face. Sick. Crooked. "You know where." Mark didn't feel his legs after that. He slammed into Rourke, tackling him into the snow. The wind howled so loud it swallowed their grunts as they fought. "You go near my daughter." "I already did," Rourke hissed. "Should have heard her scream." Mark saw red. He punched Rourke, hard enough to leave a smear of blood on the snow. Then another, and another. "You son of a—" Rourke swung back, fist cracking against Mark's jaw. They rolled, fists landing blind through the blizzard. But Mark wasn't fighting like a cop. He was fighting like a father who feared he was already too late. Finally, he forced Rourke face down in the snow and wrestled cuffs from his belt. "Caleb Rourke," he snarled, "you are under our—" Rourke laughed. Actually laughed. "You're too late, Callahan." Something tore open inside Mark. A door into bottomless pit. He slammed the cuffs shut, hauled Rourke upright, dragged him back to the cruiser. "Dispatch. This is Callahan. Suspect in custody." Static. "I'm heading home now." He didn't finish. Didn't wait for backup. He threw Rourke into the car, slammed the door so hard the window rattled. Then he drove. God. He drove like the world was burning behind him. The storm clawed at the cruiser, snow smashing sideways across the windshield, wipers barely keeping up, tires slipping on ice that felt like glass. "Hold on, Em. Just hold on." Mark's voice cracked. He'd never felt this kind of fear. Not in shootouts, not in raids, not in any moment he'd nearly died. This fear wore the shape of his daughter, and he couldn't shake Rourke's words. "You're too late." His hands shook on the wheel. His throat tightened, but he pushed harder. The cruiser fishtailed, he corrected, tires clawing at the ice. Then the house appeared through the blizzard like a bleeding memory. Lights flickering. One window shattered. Snow blowing into the living room. "No. No, no, no." Mark braked so hard the cruiser skidded sideways into the mailbox. He threw the door open before the car even stopped. He ran. Didn't feel the cold. Didn't feel the wind. Didn't feel his heartbeat slamming against his ribs. He felt nothing but raw terror. The back door hung off its hinges. Wood splintered everywhere. Blood spots on the tile. "Emma!" he screamed, voice breaking halfway through. No answer. He stumbled through the kitchen. "Emma! Ranger!" Silence. Then, a faint sound. A whimper. Small. Upstairs. Mark bolted up the staircase 2 steps at a time. His foot slid on a streak of dark red. Blood. Fresh. He choked on a breath and kept going. Then, at the landing, he saw them. Emma. On her knees. Arms wrapped around Ranger's huge body. Face streaked with tears. Blood smeared across her sleeves like red paint. And Ranger. God. Ranger wasn't moving much. His chest rose, barely. His fur matted dark on one side. His head rested in her lap like he was too tired to lift it again. Emma turned her head when she heard Mark gasp. "Daddy," she whispered. He didn't let him touch me." Mark's legs buckled. He dropped beside them, pulling both into his arms. Emma trembled, burying her face in his chest. "He saved me, Daddy. He saved me." Ranger tried to lift his head at the sound of Mark's voice. Mark placed a shaking hand on the dog's cheek. "Oh, buddy. Oh, God. Ranger. You held on. You held on for her." His voice cracked wide open. He bent forward, forehead pressed into Ranger's fur, tears falling into the dog's neck. Mark hadn't cried like this since the night he lost his wife. But tonight, his soul broke clean through. He held his daughter. He held the dog who saved her. He held the pieces of a world he nearly lost. "Thank you," he whispered into Ranger's fur, sobbing. Thank you. Thank you. And for the first time in years, Mark Callahan let himself fall apart. And the thing about moments like that, holding your child and a dying dog at the same time, is that the world doesn't slow down for you. It doesn't wait. It doesn't care. It just keeps going. Mark didn't even remember how he lifted Ranger off the floor. Didn't remember grabbing a blanket. Didn't remember sprinting down the stairs, slipping once, nearly falling with Ranger in his arms. He only remembered the snow, cold needles hitting his face as he dragged Emma into the cruiser, laying Ranger across the back seat. Blood soaking the upholstery. Emma whispering, "Please stay, Ranger. Please stay. Please stay." And Mark's own breath coming in harsh, broken bursts as he floored the car toward the only place still lit in the storm. Silver Hollow Veterinary Clinic. The sign flickered like the storm was trying to snuff it out too. Mark slammed his fist on the clinic door. "Rivers, open up! It's an emergency!" The lock clicked. Dr. Samuel Rivers, glasses crooked, hair a mess, yanked the door open. "Mark, Jesus, no time," Mark choked. "He's losing too much. Just help him, Sam." Rivers didn't hesitate. One look at Ranger, at the blood, at the shallow breaths, and his whole body shifted into that laser-focused mode only medical people have. "Get him inside. Now." They rushed the hallway. Ranger's limp body bounced in Mark's arms, blood dripping onto the tile. Emma stayed right beside him, one hand clutching Ranger's leash like it was the last string holding her world together. Rivers flipped on the surgical lights. "Put him on the table. Carefully. Mark, careful." Mark lowered him. Ranger whimpered. A tiny, broken sound. Emma flinched like the noise physically punched her. "Daddy, I'm here, honey." Rivers snapped on gloves. "IV line, warm fluids, prep gauze, find the flashlight, power's unstable again." The storm howled against the windows. Lights flickered, once, twice, then steadied. Emma stood beside the table, her hand still on the leash. Her voice barely existed. "Dr. Rivers, is he gonna... will he be..." Rivers didn't lie, didn't sugarcoat. "I'll do everything I can, sweetheart." He looked at Mark. "And I mean everything, but he's lost a lot of blood." Mark's voice cracked. "Just save him. Please." Rivers nodded once. Then the doors swung shut. Mark and Emma could do nothing but stand on the other side of a thin wooden door while the storm screamed outside. The waiting room felt too bright, too quiet, too empty. Mark paced. Emma sat frozen in a chair, fingers wrapped around Ranger's leash so tight her knuckles turned white. Every few steps, Mark stopped, looked at the surgery door, whispered, "Come on, buddy. Please, hold on." But Emma didn't move, didn't speak, just held that leash like it could anchor Ranger's soul. After 10 minutes, or maybe an hour, Emma whispered, "Daddy." He dropped to his knees instantly. Yeah, baby, I'm right here. She reached out and touched his face, tracing tear lines she couldn't see. If he dies, her breath stuttered. I lose my world again. Mark closed his eyes. Those words cut deeper than anything Caleb Rourke ever could have done. Oh, Em. He cupped her hands. Sweetheart, don't say that. But it's true, she whispered, voice breaking. Mom, then my eyes, and now Ranger. Daddy. I can't lose him too. Mark leaned his forehead against hers. He didn't hide the tears, didn't pretend to be strong. He broke. Right there with her. God, he whispered. Please, not again. Don't take anyone else from us. The storm screamed. Lights flickered. Metal clanged behind the door. Please, God, Mark breathed. Just one break. One miracle. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed before the door finally clicked. Rivers stepped out, mask dangling, hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. Mark jumped to his feet. Sam, time 900 mums. Rivers exhaled shakily. He made it. Emma gasped, like someone gave her oxygen after drowning. Mark nearly collapsed. But, Rivers said softly, he needs rest. A long time. He's still weak. Emma didn't care. Can I see him? Rivers hesitated. Only for a moment. He led them to recovery. Lights dim, machines humming. Ranger lay wrapped in blankets, IV taped to his leg. He looked small. Too small. Emma let go of Mark's hand and reached her fingers toward the bars. Ranger, it's me. For a moment, nothing. Then, the slightest movement. Ranger lifted his head maybe an inch, just enough to slide his nose toward her fingers. Emma sobbed. Ranger breathed a soft, tired exhale, like he'd been waiting just to hear her voice. Rivers whispered, that, right there, is your second miracle tonight. Mark pressed his palm to the bars beside hers. Welcome back, buddy. Ranger nudged Emma's hand again, eyes soft, tired, alive. Emma pressed her forehead against the cage, voice trembling. You came back to me. And in that tiny, fragile room at the edge of Silver Hollow, hope lived again. Not overnight, not loudly, but word spread. A blind little girl, a K9 everyone thought was broken, and a father who nearly lost both. People whispered it in the grocery store, at the diner, at the school bus stop, at the fire station. And after a few weeks, those whispers turned into something bigger, something the whole town wanted to honor. The Silver Hollow Unity Parade. Not for the cops, not for the firefighters, not for the mayor, but for Ranger, for Emma, for the Callahan family that reminded a whole town what courage actually looked like. Mark woke early that morning, staring at the ceiling like he still didn't believe the day was real. The sunlight through the curtains felt soft, not sharp, not haunting. Emma shuffled into his room in her little blue dress, tapping the doorway gently with her cane. "Daddy, is today the parade?" He rubbed his eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart. It's today." Her face lit up. Not the smile she used to have before she lost her sight, but something gentler, deeper. "Can Ranger go?" Mark hesitated. Ranger, resting at the foot of the bed, lifted his head the moment he heard his name. A slow tail thump answered for him. "He'll need to take it slow," Mark said. "But yeah, I think he'd want to." Emma knelt beside him, hugging his neck carefully around the shaved surgical patch. "You ready, Ranger?" she whispered. He pressed his nose to her cheek. His yes. The center of Silver Hollow had never been this full. Rows of folding chairs, flags, handmade posters from kids, some crooked, some spelled wrong. "Ranger is a hero," some covered in glitter. The stage was small, decorated with pine branches and winter ribbons, and right in front of it, 3 seats had been saved with handwritten signs. "Reserved, Callahan family." People gasped when they arrived. Not because of Mark, not because of Emma, but because Ranger, though thinner, slower, stitched, walked beside her without fear. A dog who'd once been nothing but trauma and instinct, now lifting his head proudly, even with his scars. Everyone stood, the whole crowd. A wave of applause rolled across the square, warm enough to reach the mountains. Emma startled at the sound. Mark placed a hand on her back. "It's for you, kiddo." She smiled softly. I can feel it." Ranger sat pressed against her leg, breathing steady and strong. Mayor Whitfield stepped to the microphone, clearing his throat. "Good morning, Silver Hollow. Today isn't about offices or titles. It's not even about safety." He looked toward Ranger. "It's about hope. Real hope. The kind that walks on 4 legs when it has every reason not to walk at all." The crowd murmured, emotional. "Ranger didn't just save a child that night," the mayor continued. "He saved a broken family and reminded this entire town what resilience looks like." Emma's breath caught. Her hand reached for Ranger's fur. He leaned into her touch. He wasn't ordered to. He wasn't trained to. He chose to. Several people wiped their eyes. Emma whispered, "Daddy, everybody's crying." Mark chuckled weakly. "Yeah, guess so." "Because of Ranger?" "Because of both of you," he whispered. The applause faded to a soft hum. Emma lifted her face toward the warmth of all those voices. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" She placed her hand on Ranger's head. I think Mom sent him. I feel it." Everything stopped. Like the whole town inhaled at once. A painful, beautiful silence washed over the square. Ranger looked up at Emma, eyes warm, gentle, knowing. Mark closed his eyes, jaw trembling. He didn't correct her, didn't explain, didn't say maybe. He felt it too. He placed his hand over hers, on Ranger's fur. I feel it too, Em. And the entire town, every last person in Silver Hollow, stayed silent, letting that moment live exactly as it was. True, heavy, and somehow healing. Ranger leaned into them both, and for the first time in a long, long time, Mark didn't feel broken anymore. He felt whole, because his family, in the strangest, most unbelievable way, had 3 hearts now. After that day, the whole town stood for Ranger. After the applause, the speeches, the tears, life in Silver Hollow slowly slipped back into its quiet, snow-wrapped rhythm. But the Callahan home, yeah, it didn't go back to normal. It became something softer, warmer, something nobody, not even Mark, thought could exist again. Snow blew across the ridge like powdered glass under the December moon. The wind carried that thin, icy whistle you only hear in small mountain towns, the kind that makes you zip your jacket all the way up whether you need to or not. On the porch of the little blue house at the end of Pinecrest Road, Emma Callahan sat wrapped in a thick blanket, her breath drifting like tiny clouds in the cold air. Ranger lay beside her, his head resting heavy on her lap, that slow, content weight only old souls carry. His fur had grown thick again, winter coat full and warm, hiding the scar that once opened him to death. Emma stroked the side of his face, her fingers moving in that gentle mapping only someone who sees with touch can understand. "Hey, boy," she whispered. "You feel how quiet it is tonight?" Ranger huffed, a low, warm sound, and nudged her hand once. "I know," she giggled softly. "Daddy says quiet nights make him nervous too. Guess all 3 of us are broken the same way." Her voice wasn't sad, more like matter-of-fact, peaceful, the kind of peace you earn the hard way. Snowflakes landed on her hair, on Ranger's ears, on the railing beside her boots, piling up slow and soft. The porch light behind her cast everything in a warm yellow glow, making the snow sparkle like falling stars. Through the frosted kitchen window, Mark Callahan stood watching them, his daughter, and the dog who saved her life, and maybe saved his too. He held a steaming mug of coffee, though he hadn't taken a sip in a while. His eyes drifted to the battered leather notebook open on the counter. His journal, the one he started because the therapist insisted, if the guilt won't leave your chest, let it at least leave your pen. On today's page in his uneven handwriting, she can't see the light, but she became the light of this house. He stared at the sentence, then whispered, voice shaky, yeah, that's true." He closed the notebook gently and walked to the door. "Mind if I join you two?" he asked softly. Emma smiled instantly. I saved you a spot, but it's a little cold. You might freeze. Mark snorted. Kiddo, I grew up in this town. I survived winters before you were even born. Emma tilted her head. Daddy. Yeah? You get cold really fast now. He groaned. Okay. Fair enough. He lowered himself beside her, an arm around her blanket-wrapped shoulders. Ranger shifted, placing one paw over Mark's boot, a silent, familiar claiming. The three of them sat like that, listening to the wind, the hush of snow, the distant howl of a coyote beyond the tree line. Mark finally asked, "What are you thinking about out here, sweetheart?" Emma took a slow breath. I can't see the snow, she said quietly. I can't even picture it anymore. Mark's throat tightened. But, she whispered, lifting her chin, I can feel the light. Everywhere. The words hit him like a soft blow. Not painful, just overwhelming. He wrapped both arms around her, snow melting in his hair, tears warming his skin. Some drops landed on Ranger's fur. The dog didn't move, didn't flinch. He just pressed closer, breathing slow and steady, as if to say, It's okay. I'm here. I've been here. Mark whispered into the winter air, You saved us, boy. You saved this entire house. Emma leaned into Ranger, hands on his cheeks. You're our light too, she murmured. Ranger closed his eyes, exhaling peacefully, a warrior finally at rest. And there, on that little porch in Silver Hollow, in a winter colder than most but softer than the last, sat a family people once said would never recover. A father who lost a wife, a child who lost her sight, a dog who lost his whole world. Three broken souls who found each other in the storm and built something new out of the ashes, something stronger, something gentler, something whole. Snow drifted quietly around them, glowing under the porch light like falling blessings. And for the first time in a long, long time, Mark Callahan believed in tomorrow. If you were standing on that porch with them, where would your eyes go first? A, the snow. B, the father holding his daughter. C, the dog who never gives up.